And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I enjoyed the Army-Navy game yesterday, which wasn't super exciting. I have to bring this up. I know that we're here to talk more national championship stuff. It's a little disappointing that the one year where both of those teams were really freaking good, that the game was that much of a blowout. I don't know if you felt the same way or not. Little lame.
I was at a 1-year-old's birthday party, so not a big deal.
You didn't miss much.
I mean, yeah. Well, the game was on, and I got to see a lot of it. I had to come home and watch the highlights of it. I mean, look, good old Navy, the best year that Army's had. You go in there and you ruin it. Good on them. But I got to be real with you, man. I was kind of like Pablo Escobar, in Narcos, when he's sitting there and he's just rocking on his chair, like not really knowing what to do. My wife told me I needed to calm down. She's like, she could see it on my face. I need to calm down. So this is what we did. We went and looked at Christmas lights last night. My son Ben got to see Spider-Man Christmas lights. He's like, whip them up, Spider-Man! And then everybody's like looking at us. I'm like, oh my God, heavens, dude, So it was a very interesting Saturday. I mean, when you do this for 17 straight weeks, it gets pretty crazy. But no longer the wait shall be. We have a playoff game on Friday. We'll talk about some of the paths that some of these teams may have for the national title. The portal is picking up. We'll talk about Jackson Arnold heading to Auburn here tonight, Joe. But got to start it off with this. The closest a Heisman Trophy has ever gone was to Travis Hunter this weekend. I guess your quick thoughts, we reacted to it after the fact, but the closest it had ever been, I did not think that it was going to be that close, but yet enough. Here it is.
Right. Well, one, I was surprised by how close it was too, because it kind of sounded like when you talked to some people who had votes and you just felt like
I thought it was going to be a blowout from what we had heard.
Right. And that didn't end up being the case. But the one thing that was odd about it is how visceral of a reaction that people had to it, which I didn't like. It's okay to be happy for Travis Hunter and to recognize that what he did is super unique and be maybe a little bit annoyed that Ashton Jeanty didn't win. But the way that people were trying to go after Travis Hunter is just, it's super freaking lame. I also, the other part and the big thing that we talked about in our video, what Travis Hunter did is so hard to replicate. People have replicated what it's almost impossible. People have done what Ashton Jeanty did. There's running backs that have done and accomplished what he did throughout the history of the sport. So much so that there's 3 guys with more yards in a single season than him still above him. So I don't understand why so many people were hating all over Travis Hunter. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the natural hate towards Colorado from college football fans that don't like him. We were the ones who picked Travis Hunter. We wanted Travis Hunter to win it. So we're not on that side of things. I just wish people were a little bit more level-headed, which I guess is impossible to get in the world of college football.
Do it against Penn State. Look, Melvin Gordon did the same thing that you did and didn't win it.
Right.
And by the way, he did it in the Big Ten that year where Ohio State was a juggernaut and still went off. So with all due respect, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Wisconsin played LSU that year too, and game 1 maybe, if I'm not mistaken. So either it was that year or the year before that, I don't remember. Melvin Gordon did it in the Big Ten. Darren McFadden split carries and almost had 2,000 yards in the SEC. Calm down, dude. This whole thing of Ashton Jeanty, I think he's a good player. I think he's a great player. Y'all need to calm y'all's ass down. Here's a hot take. I would have given it to Dylan Gabriel over him.
I don't disagree with that either. I don't.
Oh, you want another hot take?
Okay.
I give it to Cam Ward over him. I mean,
I don't know if I go that far because Cam Ward's out of the playoff mix. They did. Melvin Gordon did play LSU the
Boise
first
State
game.
shouldn't be in the playoff.
I mean, we've agreed with that on the entire time. But LSU, by the way, did play. That was the year, though, that Ohio State played Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, and Ohio State
blew
won
them out
59-0. And Melvin Gordon only had 94 yards on 26 carries. I'm willing to bet
Cardell Jones. What was his stat line?
257 for 3 touchdowns, only 17 passing attempts. But I'd be willing to bet that Ash Gentie's stat line is going to replicate Melvin Gordon's stat line when they face off with Penn State. I'd be willing to put money on that. That is going to be eerily similar. Melvin Gordon was a better prospect than coming out than Ash Gentie is.
I mean, again, this kid's playing on both sides of the football, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, you can hate Colorado, you can hate Deion, you can hate Shador, you can hate Travis. What are we doing? Like, I knew it was doing it in a power conference. I mean, right. Like, so what are we trying to do here?
Suddenly, everybody knew who Nick Nash was when you brought up that Travis Hunter was a top 5 receiver in the sport. Everybody was saying that Nick Nash was the best receiver in college football. He had a couple of games where I don't think he exceeded 10 yards, or he had one game where he didn't exceed 10 yards. He was a receiver at San Jose State that's 25 years old. And suddenly everybody knew every little thing about Nick Nash coming into the Biletnikoff Award, finalists. It's just so stupid.
And fans do that, right? Like, for example, Bryce Underwood leaves, and then I have to deal with, well, the backup was even better than him. No, he wasn't. No, he's not. Like, fans are going to justify what they need to justify in their own minds. And it is what it is. All right. So, Joe, we're going to get to potential national championship runs. What different teams and what they have to do. We got to start with Tennessee, Penn State, Indiana, and Texas. We'll go through that as well. But we do have a super chat from Cody. He says, who's going to replace Marshall in the bowl game? If I'm not mistaken, it's going to be Louisiana Tech. So
it is.
We're not the gossip column here. Did you hear what went on with Marshall and their head coach, and then like them basically pushing him out all year long, and he won the freaking conference? And I'm like, oh heavens! And that whole thing with Marshall's a big deal. But we will talk coaching things here today. Mm-hmm. Joe, Rich Rodriguez back at our favorite school, West Virginia.
I'm happy about that. Well, we'll get to that later on, but maybe their fans could be a little bit more polite when we talk about them in the future.
Oh boy, I'm
just asking for too much.
No, I mean, listen, I could take the heat. It's kind of been tongue-in-cheek for me. Okay, but my thing is that if you're going to be that mad and then attack my children and then attack me, okay. But when it's right, you better come in here and say, hey, man, my bad. Like some of the things you send are a little bit crazy. So anyway, all right. But Cody McGee did send that. We greatly appreciate that $2 super chat. Mm-hmm. Sam Kim says Blake makes some really good points you won't hear from anyone else, but then he just throws out a dumbass or he just goes dumbass like the Boise take. I don't know what that means.
That's a good question. I mean, trying to say that he doesn't like your Boise take, that you don't think they're very good.
I never said that they weren't really good. I don't believe that they belong in the playoff. That's what I believe.
Exactly.
Right. So justify to me why they should be. Oh, they were at Oregon.
Boise State lost as close of a game, nearly as close as Idaho did to Oregon. We're not talking about Idaho being in the college football playoff.
And they have a new head coach too. So that's and look at me progressing, getting in your FCS world. Yeah. Idaho's got a new head coach. How about
they're getting one. Yeah.
Is what it is. We'll see y'all. We'll see where that goes soon. Let us do this. Let's get to a quick break. We're going to talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When Joe and I return, we're going to break down some of these national title runs that some of these teams in the playoff can go. We'll come back and do that next. Stay with us. Oh, and by the way, hit the like and share. Joe, don't be a Rudy Poo. Hit the like and share. We're trying to get to 13,000 subs on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button too. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag.
We're back.
By the way, just throwing this out there. Did you see how the Colts lost today?
No, I missed it.
They threw a double pass that got picked off 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and they went for a pick six, and the Broncos are going to wind up winning the football game.
That's ridiculous.
Stupid coaching, even in the NFL, man, I tell you. Kenny Dillingham, you better be careful when you do that. All right, let's get to it here. So, Joe, we're going to continue on our path here as teams go and play in the national title. We're going to start off tonight with the Tennessee Volunteers have made their way inside the playoff. Joe, we've been on this run on doing national title runs, and Tennessee is going to have a very difficult path if they make it to a national title, if they play for a national title game, or even get to the semis. When you look at Tennessee, what's their path of getting that national title game? What is their path of winning the whole thing?
First off, talking about the Ohio State-Tennessee game, we previewed that fully last week. Be sure to go and check out that preview that we have.
And we're going to do it again tomorrow, so get ready for it.
We're going to talk about it from a different angle tomorrow and reset on expectations there. But one of the things that we discussed is that why they could have an advantage to beat Ohio State. Ohio State's offensive line is banged up. They're down two of their better players without Seth McLaughlin at center and Josh Simmons. They've been without for a while now. I know that they've got some guys that have stepped up and played decently well, but going up against an incredibly deep defensive line for Tennessee, led by James Pierce Jr. and Omar Norman Lott, it is a lot for them to handle. So their path starts with their defensive line carrying them and dominating against this Ohio State team. And if they're able to beat Ohio State, we discussed why Oregon is in still control despite having a difficult path. But to take the opposite angle here, Blake, of what if things go wrong for Oregon? We've brought up a ton of times how Oregon's run defense has not been consistent. The way that they played in the Big Ten championship game raised concerns that we've brought up in separate weeks throughout the year. So the way that they can beat Oregon and why they maybe were given a sneaky potential upset situation is if Dylan Sampson comes out of the Ohio State game riding some momentum and has a huge day against that Oregon run defense. That, to me, I think is the biggest catalyst for them going on a run, because Texas and whoever they could face in the national championship game is very beatable if they're able to knock off Oregon.
Here comes the hot take, and you know I don't like to be the hot take guy like, hey, this is the team. I'm not going to come out of nowhere and say that I think Tennessee's winning a national title hot take, right?
Okay.
Like, that's just not me. I don't do that for clicks or whatever.
Okay.
They are my dark horse to win the national title game. And let me tell you why. Because they do things that very well that Oregon and Ohio State both have issues in. Their biggest strength is Oregon, Ohio State's biggest weakness at the current moment. I think they can go in here and win this game now. Like, I really do. I would lean Ohio State because, look, man, I mean, can Tennessee get over that hump? It's still Ohio State. It's on the road. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. Joe, they can line up and dominate the line of scrimmage defensively against Ohio State better than, I think, from a speed aspect, than what Michigan did. Right? Michigan was very blunt force, very downhill. We're going to be in your face. We're going to dominate the interior. Where Tennessee has that, without a doubt, they got serious dudes at edge. So it's a completely different thing, and you're now having to replace tackle, center. It's a lot of things that they throw at you. If Jalen Milroe cannot run away from this defense, Will Howard cannot. We've seen this defense go up against better offensive lines and dominate. And so I've seen them go toe-to-toe with Georgia. I've seen them on the offensive line in the run game, not in the pass game. Hold on just a minute on that. Mm-hmm. I've seen them go up against Georgia, who's been top 15 defensively all year. Joe, in the first half, they ran right at them, and there wasn't anything Georgia could do. I think that Tennessee is just a bad matchup for those teams because their two biggest strengths are their opponent's two biggest weaknesses. Now, what worries me going into this, there are going to be moments and times, like we talked about with Notre Dame a couple of days ago, and I told you I wasn't trolling, and I'm not trolling here. Can you throw the ball on critical third downs to win football games? That's where it comes down to. When you're converting on third downs on the road, big game environments, big game situations is where you make your mark. So when I look at Tennessee, can they go into Columbus, Ohio and run the ball effectively? Can they get after an offensive line that is really banged up and get after Will Howard is ultimately the question. But, Joe, I got to tell you, I could see them doing both. I could see their defensive line doing that. I could see their offensive line doing that against Oregon because Oregon's been bad defensively in the run game. I look at Tennessee as my dark horse to win this thing, man. If there's going to be a team that comes out of nowhere, I think it's them.
I think you bring up a really good point, too, because Josh Heupel has always been a sneaky good coach. Like, he has always been a coach that has prepared his guys to take advantage of weaknesses to pull out wins that I think a lot of people aren't expecting. Like, let's look back to when we previewed the Alabama-Tennessee game. I think we both thought that Alabama was going to find a way to win that game on the road. A lot of people nationally believe that as well. They thought that after the Arkansas loss, that Tennessee was showing some serious signs of immaturity and that they weren't ready for the big stage, but they finished out the year strong and they found ways to get wins and to accomplish everything that they needed to by leaning on their defense in the run game. I think you brought up what also is, you know, we know that I already discussed Dylan Sampson having a big game against Oregon, the D-line having a big game against Ohio State, like you reinforced there. But you added in, I think, what's the most important piece of all this. Nico and him stepping up to the plate and going from where in spurts throughout this year where he has played as the young budding star that's still yet to reach his potential. If he's able to take that step forward, which is asking a lot, but having multiple weeks to prepare and to get locked in and to maybe take a deep breath and just to think ahead to, like, you know, what are we going to do when we get this playoff matchup? He's had a little bit of time to clear his head. How does he play in these games? Because if Nico plays to that potential and he's impactful as a runner and he's making those plays as a passer in those third down situations, he is the most physically gifted quarterback in this entire playoff field, without a doubt. If he can play to 75% of his potential, that national championship run that you're talking about is 100% attainable. So I agree with you on this. I think Tennessee, out of any of the teams that we've talked about that are in the more unexpected category that would be the sleeper team category, Tennessee leads the bunch that they could go on this hypothetical run.
He's got to get help now, too.
Yeah.
He's got to get help from his offensive line. He's got to get help from receivers, Joe. They're dropping more balls than
oh my! What are you?
They're dropping where you're going balls. With that. Well, they're dropping more balls than a strip club. Okay, I mean, like it gets to a place where he's not getting help either. I feel like that we're labeling Nico in the sense of that it's all been on him, and it's not been all on him. I think Tennessee, when you're talking about a team, Joe, that's 8th in the country in rush defense and rush defense. Ohio State, can you run the ball? And then if you're in a situation where that you got to throw the ball in every down with Will Howard because you can't establish a running game, then what? Then what? That's where it starts becoming for me. So then I look at them, Joe. I think that even in a semifinal game, I think they could beat Texas. I saw him go toe-to-toe with Georgia. It's the same exact situation. Those teams are very even here. So, again, if there is a dark horse that presents a very interesting puzzle piece for both of these Big Ten schools early, it is Tennessee. I'm not leaning with them. I told you last week that Oregon's in my national title game, so obviously I'm not picking Tennessee to beat them. But if there is somebody that wouldn't surprise me, it's them. One other thing I want to throw in here, too, about Tennessee. Tennessee, for what it's worth, is the number 1 team or number 2 team in the SEC on third down defense. They're 5th in the country in third down defense. Joe, Ohio State has struggled there, man. They've struggled. They're 47th, and I get, oh my God, they're 47th. They have not been able to run the ball on third down. Go look at their third down efficiency rate after the Nebraska game. Sputtered, fell out of control. So I look at Tennessee, man. I might call a mild upset on Wednesday. I'm talking myself into this. I really am. So we'll see. One other thing, too. Scoring defense, they're tied for 4th. So Tennessee's had a light schedule early, but they hadn't had a light schedule in the SEC. That's for damn sure. So we're going to find out how these teams match up for sure. So anyway, all right. Penn State here next.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Joe, we continue on our path here with teams that we are projecting on how they can win the national title. Right now, you and I hit on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Well, people are going to watch this video, or people watching this right now. Well, they got 2 really easy games to start off with. That's why.
They do.
Well, they do. So, your thoughts on how you could see Penn State making a run here towards a national title?
They have the best path. No hot take. Nothing new. No new information. We've already put this out there. They have the best path. I almost think it's to their advantage that they don't have a week off, where it's almost like a beginning of the season. Like this is back to September, where your opening game is against a Power 4 opponent that gives you a competitive matchup. And then your next game is against a good G5 team that gets you a competitive matchup, but is a winnable game. So they build momentum with these 2 performances that they have. I would be completely stunned if they lost either of those matchups. And anyone who thinks that they're going to lose to SMU or Boise State, they're lying to you. They're just throwing that out there and making it seem like they've got some take. If it comes to fruition, something crazy freaking happened, okay? But where they are on this side of the bracket, where they would either face Notre Dame or they would get to face Georgia to get themselves to this national championship game, we've already illustrated this a little bit. You face off with a Notre Dame team that has a really young head coach in Marcus Freeman. And a lot of the same can James Franklin get it done in the big games criticisms for him apply to Marcus Freeman. So you win in that matchup because you have that experience advantage, and you get to face Georgia with their backup quarterback in. We have talked highly of Gunnar Stockton, but there's still a world with not having enough context of what he is like as a player that he could have a bit of a rough go, that he could not look very good. So if you match up with that Georgia team, you get the advantage to have Abdul Carter chasing down Gunnar Stockton. That should set you up for success. So the whole point of, and I think the whole way to look at the perspective here for Penn State and their path to getting to this national championship game and what it would take, there is the least amount of friction out of any of the teams that we've talked about. They have had a lot of freaking great things to set them up with this position. And I would argue if they don't at least reach the semifinal, I think that is a huge, huge failure on their part. A huge, huge failure on their part if they don't make it to the semis.
Well, look, I don't know if we get to SMU tonight on how they would get to a national title. There are a couple of concerns I want to throw in here, okay? Here's a concern that I have. I always think it's a concern when you have a quarterback that can move like Russell can, right? Like, I mean, what did I say, Russell?
Yeah.
Jennings. I think of the kid that played at Duncanville. That Jennings can, right? And there just comes a part where, look, man, let's look at SMU season. We talked about this the other week, even in previewing into the ACC championship game, why they were going to beat or where they were going to lose to Clemson. Joe, he physically by himself brought them back in that game, right? And how did he do it? He would run around. He didn't have time. Nobody can catch him. He's throwing the ball very accurate in moments and times. Mm-hmm. He's able to run the ball in for the into the end zone. And I question, has Penn State seen a guy like that all year? Have they seen anybody like that? And look,
Dylan Gabriel's probably the closest, and he's not even a good one. It's not a comparison.
Then it's not a comparison then.
Yeah.
So, look, what do we know about quarterbacks like this and what they've done in the past? We've seen them run all over the place and just knock teams off, right? So there is that. But that is the concern that I would have. I don't know if there's a concern in the next round and when they play. Joe, they've been really good all year. Like, what are we discussing with them? They went toe-to-toe with Oregon. Mm-hmm. They started swinging all over the place. And let's call it what it is. That was probably the most electric game or a game where Oregon's like, damn, bro. Like, we can't do anything to stop this team right now. They went toe-to-toe. They did lose to Ohio State, and you're right. They're on the 1-yard line. And I feel like they're there, right? Like, I really do. They have an easy path in what you just discussed that can get them there. Man, I just don't know if I can see them getting over the hump. And look, I did the same thing with Notre Dame, so I'm going to do the same thing here with Penn State. Joe, there's really just – I got to be proven wrong here. I got to be proven that you can actually do something. I don't think that there's a path, right? I really don't, because every time I see you in these big game situations, you let me down. And I don't want you to let me down. I love State College. I love Penn State. Really, I do. But I feel like you're finding ways to lose these big games and losing these big moments. I think you can out-physical some teams. I think you proved to yourself this. You proved to yourself that you can go up against an Oregon team and trade punches. Look, the fight went to a decision. That's only round one, baby. You know that you can fight with them. Can you ultimately get over that hump? We said the same thing about Texas. I think that they're going to out-physical both opponents and the first couple of rounds, and then they'll get to Georgia, and we'll have an ultimate litmus test on what that game and what the outcome could look like.
Yeah, the way that you put that in position, that I think is the right thought to have here. Is that Penn State has played as a really good team. They've just fallen short in their two toughest challenges.
They're a yard line away.
Yeah.
They're a bad penalty away from tying Oregon and almost going into overtime. Let's just call it what it is, man. I mean, like, they have been there. It's just every single time.
The score against Oregon's not reflective of how well they played, especially for the fact that they were down big early and they were able to scrap and claw to get back into that football game. They don't have teams that are really going to slow them down until they get to that semifinal matchup. They have, out of any of these teams that we have talked about, the greatest chance to make the Final Four because of who they get to face, because they have the advantage along their defensive line. It all comes down to, can you beat Notre Dame or can you beat Georgia? And they do get an advantage against both of those opponents because of the deficiencies for those teams that we talked about.
Right.
The ability for them here, and I would argue it's an advantage that some people would scratch their head and think, why would that be an advantage? Not finishing in your two other hardest matchups sometimes and can set up for teams to get over that hump later on in the year. I'd rather have a team not finish in the beginning of the season, face adversity, know how to overcome that adversity, to be able to look at each other in the huddle and say, guys, we've been here before. We just need to get it done this time. The fact that they've been through those situations sets them up for better success compared to some of the teams that they could see. It doesn't help that Georgia's seen a lot of adversity, but going up against the Notre Dame team that has not faced many challenges gives them an advantage. And then depending on who they'd see in the national championship game, again, they would have potentially that opportunity to learn to fight through those difficulties that they've been through.
Again, and I'll just keep saying it, I think you're one of the top 8 teams in the country.
Yeah,
I think I can make an argument you're a top 16 team in the country. The problem that I have with you is that every time, I'm on repeat on this. Every time that you get in a big situation, you get to the 1-yard line and you send an offensive lineman in motion and you can't get in from the 1-yard line.
Yeah, stop getting too cute with it. That's one thing. That stuff works great early on in the game. Right. Short yardage situations and like the important spots, just call the freaking bread and butter plays, man.
Here's the thing. What did you think that they were going to think that you're doing? They know that he's not going out for a pass. They know that. He didn't check himself in. What did you think, bud? Like, I mean,
that's a good second drive play where you're like, you know what? All right, we need to get a little confusion in here, and maybe we'll build some momentum off of this, and then we've got other opportunities. But like, game on the line where you've got one shot, you got to just run the damn ball. Throw a damn pass to Tyler Warren. Get a fade route to him in the back corner of the end zone.
Right.
Run the freaking Wildcat with him if you're going to really decide to get cute, or run a read option with him. But that is the most that you need to do. So that's another just kind of last thought that you bring up here. Stop getting too freaking cute, Andy Kotelnicki, and just call the damn plays the way that they need to be called.
You need to do it, man. All right. We have some breaking news here, Joseph. Heather Dinich of ESPN says that she can confirm that Marcus Freeman has agreed to a long-term contract with the Chicago Bears, believed to be a 4-year. No, I'm just joking.
Okay, what the fuck?
But it is a long-term contract extension, believed to be a 4-year extension that locks him up 6 more years, according to a source. Let's pivot right here and talk about this. Notre Dame has extended Marcus Freeman and given him another 4 years in the extension, making it to 6. Your thoughts?
All right. Well, okay. My gut reaction, I think Notre Dame fans aren't going to really love this, but one, good job by his agent by using the Chicago Bears thing as fuel to the fire, because I'm sure that he would have been interviewed for that opening if there was not some sort of contract extension to heat up the situation further. Marcus Freeman has done a great job of finishing this year. He has done a great job of bouncing back from the NIU loss. And I give him credit for rallying the team and them looking completely different than they would have in any other situation in his first 2 years. He has shown growth. He has shown improvement. I think that there is always going to be a path for Marcus Freeman to be a tremendous head coach in the college game because of his effectiveness as a recruiter, because of his ability to communicate with young men and to rally them. I just feel like this is a little bit premature. I feel like for how good they were this year, for them to have not played a playoff game yet, and to have this come before the playoff game, oh God, the more that I think about this, the more that I hate it. If they go out there and they lose to Indiana, oh no, this is going to be a joke. I hate the time, Blake. I hate the timing of this. I mean, this should have happened after the playoff. This news should have broke after the playoff. Right. This should not have happened during the playoff, because, in all seriousness, this is going to be, if they need to play great football, and we know that Marcus Freeman and this coaching staff has gotten in their own way in preparation for games, and anyone who wants to argue with me over that, then we can look back at the NIU game, and the Marshall game, and the Stanford game, and the Clemson game. So at the end of the freaking day, if they don't play well against Indiana and they freaking lose at home, this is going to look really freaking bad, and we're going to get clowned on. So that's my take on this.
All right. Well, first off, let's see if these reports are legit. I'm assuming, coming from Heather Dinich, they probably are pretty legit, but just in case. I don't hate your thought on that. If you're Notre Dame, though, and that's your guy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, you got to do these things for recruiting. You got to do these to show that you have a long-term deal with them. And Joe, a lot of people have said Ryan Day needs to do what Coach Calipari did. If Ohio State comes open, is Marcus Freeman a viable choice? Is he a viable candidate? What do they know that we don't? Because you and I both know that after this playoff run, some of these coaches can leave. What happens if Ryan Day loses to Tennessee in round 1? What happens? So they're not going to fire him, but you understand what I'm trying to get at here.
Well, I think that's part of the fuel to the fire for why they would get this extension done, is because they would want to avoid him interviewing for the job.
She did say that it would come after the end of the season when it was finalized. So nothing's technically final here per her. So, I mean, there is an out here. But it does seem that there's from my understanding, it would be that both parties have agreed to the contract extension.
Yeah,
I mean, if he hadn't signed, then he hadn't signed. But you can't have a head coach on a 3-year contract. You can't. It's
wait. No, but this isn't like the Billy Napier situation where his contract was. He was on a 6-year deal. There were 3 more years coming up on his contract. They just finished a recruiting class. So I don't have a problem with extending Marcus Freeman. That's not my problem. I think that he is bound to become a great coach. Again, I criticized him after the NIU loss, and I take back some of those statements that I had. I hate the timing of this.
You said to fire him.
I said that he would never be the coach, but they finished out the season without any stupid losses, which was an accomplishment by him. The timing of this is dumb. The timing of this is really freaking dumb because it is going to fuel the fire of everyone that loves to clown on Notre Dame, which is most of America. Like everybody looks for a reason to make fun of Notre Dame that does not like Notre Dame.
You don't make it necessarily easy on yourself when Georgia's in a battle with Georgia Tech and Haynes King played in one game and they didn't in another, and people are like, "Hey, bud, y'all going out there and saying that wasn't a big deal makes you look dumb."
That is, I know what you're trying to say here, but look, the
it
other
does make you look dumb.
Wait, okay. The last bit with this before we move on to the next game, Blake. He has been a coach, and I kind of mentioned this a second ago. He has been a coach that seemingly sometimes allows pressure to get to it because he's a young coach. It just happens with young coaches. He's been a head coach for 3 years, and he's in his mid-30s.
Yeah, he's our age, or he's my age.
Your age. It just feels like something that could create unnecessary pressure in his mind, in the player's mind, in the coaching staff's mind of like, damn, we just got all this confirmed, this confirmed future for us leading this team. We better show up on Saturday. I hate the implications of this before a playoff game is even kicked off.
Is this like bad juju for Notre Dame?
Yes. Coaching decisions that happen early or in weird timing. The perfect example is when Clark Lee announced that he was taking the Vanderbilt job. They had one of the best defenses in the country that year, like top 3 defense. They played like ass against Clemson, and they played like ass in the college football playoff. It is coaching shit like this has negatively impacted them time and time again in the history of Notre Dame football.
Y'all told me it was a Brian Kelly thing, though.
Well, it is partially a Brian Kelly thing, too.
Well, if it's an
he should have told Clark Lee. He should have told Clark Lee to wait. That's what he should have done.
I mean, in fairness, Brian Kelly was on the plane to go tell his team that he was leaving, and Pete Thamel just leaked it anyway. I guess it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
Here's my thoughts. Look, it doesn't bother me. You feel like you have your man. Do what you got to do, but don't complain to me if you need to buy him out and you need to fire his ass that you don't have the money. That's all I'm going to say.
They will have the money.
Okay, then it's not a problem. Then it's not a problem. And your schedule's too easy to really.
Next year, it's the following years. It's not. We scheduled Alabama and Texas, so like that. This was an aberration.
You're at least going to lose 2 games.
I don't think we play them both in the same year.
Oh, so what about teams in the SEC that got to play them in the same year?
Let's get to the next game.
Speaking of Texas, Joe, we continue on our path here on talking about teams that have a legit national title run. Now we get to the University of Texas and the Texas Longhorns. Your thoughts on what does Texas have to do? What can they do? What do they have to do to get to a national title and win the whole thing, man?
Well, they're another team that was given a super favorable opportunity based on who they get to play in the first round and in the second round, like the path that we discussed for Penn State. You do hear some folks that try to hype up the possibility for Clemson to upset Texas, and it all comes down to how Quinn Ewers plays. But Clemson is the perfect type of a game for how Texas has performed this year, where they just dominate a mid-level, slightly above average team, and then the Texas fans start talking smack. They're in this position going up against an offensive line that's incredibly mediocre, that could not run on SMU in the second half. They should be able to dominate that game. Arizona State does not have the bodies, especially on their defensive line, to slow down Trey Wisner and that rushing attack from Texas. But where the real conversation comes into play is how would they play theoretically in a game against Oregon? I think that, and this comes up with every time that we talk about a matchup against Oregon, your inability to get Trey Wisner going has hurt you in some of your worst performances. You're going
against Georgia. Let's call it what it is.
Against Georgia specifically. Going up against a run defense that has allowed significant production to opposing running backs in some of their games.
Mm-hmm.
If you put an emphasis on running the football, that's the path. That's how you beat Oregon and get to the national championship game, is running the football as effectively as you can against that Oregon run defense. I know we keep bringing that up, but that is the most important thing, because when they don't run the football and there's 2 Georgia losses, Quinn Ewers is throwing the ball too much, and when he's throwing the ball too much, he fumbles and he throws interceptions, plain and simple.
You're right on the quote-unquote easy path. What's interesting to me is, how does Clemson respond here? How do they respond? They got new life. Hey, man, we're going to a playoff. I've seen Quinn Ewers battle with teams, and I've seen Texas this season battle with teams that, quite frankly, are not better than Clemson. And I am talking about Vanderbilt. So you are right. Texas has the receivers. They have the offensive line. They probably have the better quarterback in this scenario. They have the better D-line, linebacker, secondary. You're right. Coaching staff. Got it all. Maybe not coaching staff. I mean, Dabo still won 2 national titles, for what it's worth. I'm interested, man, because every time that Texas, it's a lot like Penn State, to what your credit was and what you said. Are you going to get over this hump? You've gotten back to where you want to be. Can you get over it? And I don't know if they can. And later down the road, I think they can early. I think they can against Clemson. I think they can against Arizona State. I think that they match up well against Oregon, for what it's worth. The question that I'm battling in my mind with Texas right now, Joe, is I picked Georgia to win the national title. I picked them in the preseason to win the national title. And yet here we are again. And I'm asking myself, if a team loses twice to my national champion, how do I react to it? Now, you're right. They weren't able to throw the ball. I mean, they weren't able to run the ball effectively enough, and that is their biggest issue. But here's what I do know. They went up against the secondary and threw that thing all around. Now, against Georgia, the second time, they had some goofy things that had to happen. Balls had to be batted up in the air. I don't blame Quinn Ewers on the interceptions he threw in the SEC championship game. They're freakishly stupid plays, right? Guy bats the ball in the air and he's running down the sidelines and he catches it. Okay, great play. What do you want me to do there? I saw Quinn make some elite throws. There comes a part where, Joe, what would benefit them is the style of matchup that they're getting into. I think that you just being who you are can win these first 2 games. What happens when they do have a running game and can run the ball against an Oregon team that can't stop anything? So we know what happens if they can't run the ball. Quinn Ewers cannot throw them into a win. But when they are able to establish that running game, A&M happens. Right? Where they're able to establish somewhat of a running game, and Quinn makes a critical throw and throw it down, even though he got picked off for a pick 6 late again. It just comes down to they dominated that football game in a 10-point win. Dominated it. So I look at them and say, look, their path is easy, but again, there goes to a point where styles make fights. Now, last thing I'm going to say here. If I'm Steve Sarkisian and I'm in this playoff run and they're struggling, I am putting in Arch Manning.
Yep.
I am putting in Arch Manning because I don't know if he does not give you a better chance to win a national title.
I agree with that, and I think that it goes in line with what the general approach needs to be with decision-making for this playoff run. They need to, Blake, take as much out of the hands of Quinn Ewers as possible. And I know that sounds super, super negative to say, but
or give him easy throws and make plays for him.
Yes,
behind that. Right.
He is a gifted player. When he is in rhythm and there is pressure off of his shoulders to be Superman, and he creates situations where he thinks he has to be. That's been his problem. He thinks that he has to go and make the big play when he doesn't need to, and it leads to these turnovers that he has. Running the ball more effectively and finding ways and not abandoning it in close games is really important. Bringing in Arch more and using him as a runner, which has been impactful, needs to happen more often. Instead of just springing him in there and feels like random short yardage situations, bring him in for maybe not a whole series, but at the beginning of a series to run the ball a couple of times, maybe get a pass off and then bring Quinn back in. There are creative ways to take things off of his shoulders. I just don't want to see a confidence impacted Quinn Ewers have a bad interception in a close game that completely takes them out of it, kind of like what happened against Georgia, or lets the team back in it like Texas A&M. The teams in this field, most of them, minus the cupcakes that we've talked about, are much better offensively than Texas A&M. If you have those turnovers late in the game where you're leading by whatever it was, 17 points, and you can't finish, they will storm back on you. They have to be better at taking things off of his plate, because he is just not that type of a guy that is 400 yards, 70% completion percentage, and 4 touchdowns because they can't run the football. He's just not.
Here's the thing, though. I'm going to end it with this. I keep thinking about Texas in my mind. If I'm saying that Georgia's the best team in the country, which is essentially what I'm saying with me picking to win a natty, then what am I saying about Texas really? They face the 73rd ranked run defense in Clemson. They face an Arizona State team that really stinks at stopping the run. And then you have an Oregon team that just gave up 290 yards to Penn State. There's one thing I do know about Texas. They are more physical than Penn State. I mean, I look, brother, they going to get after your ass if you're not careful. They just have an issue at running back at the current moment. It's not helping them. Again, their biggest weakness, we've seen it. It's not like you're going up against Georgia. Oh man, here comes Georgia. They got a good run defense. Like if they were facing Tennessee, Joe, in the matchup in a semifinal, yeah, brother, this ain't a good matchup for you, dog. Like you can't run on Georgia. You ain't gonna run on Tennessee neither, no. Big Daddy. Mm-hmm. So there just comes a part where if it is Oregon, I could see that path where it helps them offensively. Defensively, Joe, I'm going to keep saying this. They have not been tested through the air. Sorry, they hadn't. They hadn't been tested. Carson Beck has been all over the place all year. Gunnar Stockton, for what it's worth, went 12 of 18 against them. They were getting picked apart. Like, let's. I know it's for 71 yards. I get it. They got picked apart. So if there is an offense that can throw the football too, boy. I'm not basing everything off the stat. I know what my eyes see. Okay. So last one here before we get to the transfer portal, correct?
Yes.
All right. So Joe, last one here. We're talking about teams that and the path that they would be on for a national title run. The last one we end up here with is Indiana. How do you see that one playing out? And let me ask you this question. Does Indiana have the toughest path imaginable to get to a national title run?
They do. They have a really difficult path. And I feel like the case for all, 7 other teams that we've discussed, there's a world where they could win a national title. I'm sorry to do this, Indiana fans. I don't think it's likely that you're going to be one of these teams that pulls it out. But there's a capability for them to surprise teams. The fact that you're facing off with Notre Dame in your state, and there's a possibility that you could show up with a good crowd. It's not like you're seeing weather that you're not used to, like these teams from Texas are dealing with. If you are able to take advantage of Riley Leonard and create situations for him on 3rd and long, like we talked about, force a turnover, slow down their rushing attack, which you did an effective job of when you were faced off against Ohio State until a little bit later on in the game. If your run defense plays as well as it's been advertised, that's how you beat Notre Dame. For them to try and knock off Georgia is where we start to get really sketchy here. I got to be honest, I don't really know if I can make the case for them to play well enough against that Georgia defensive line, Blake. I might have to stop it short there because I do not see a world where them and Penn State that they're going to be able to slow down those D lines, because both, especially Georgia, are extremely overwhelming. And we saw the issues that Indiana's offensive line had when they faced off with Ohio State. I think the last bit with that, the way that we know that they could go on a run is if their offensive line has an amazing game against Notre Dame and they look completely different. But that's asking for a lot. That is asking for a miracle in a way.
Well, here's the thing. What do we know about Michigan at the current moment? Michigan wasn't a great football team, but what we did know was they figured something out at the end of the season. What was it? You know what, man? Screw it. If we get beaten doing it, we're going to stay with our philosophy. We're going to be physical. We're going to be physical at the line of scrimmage, and we're going to run the football. So get over it. It's what we're doing. This is who we are this season, right? They physically dominated in moments and times against Indiana. They did. When Indiana played Ohio State, they got out physicaled. Now, what's interesting is I thought that their whole game plan was completely dookie. Like it was bad. Why are you running the football that effectively on Ohio State and you're getting away from it? Like, Joe, you tell me. They go down the field and they scored. They ran the ball all over the place. They started thinking that Curtis Rourke can go down there and start throwing the ball around. Like, what are we doing? I don't know. Maybe they can run the ball on a team like Notre Dame. Maybe they can't. I've seen it happen against Ohio State. We'll see. I just think that they're going to get so manhandled here. That's how I feel. If Notre Dame wets their pants like they normally do in the playoff, sorry, but they do. If they wet their pants here, that's a whole different story. You could get past one hurdle. You were right on one thing. Listen, man, you're going in this game against Notre Dame. Make them throw the football. You were able to hold Ohio State very easily in moments to critical third downs, and Will Howard either made the throw. We came in the Sunday after that, like, hey, man, Will just made some elite throws. No, not anything you could do about it. Maybe you do that, but you're right. I'm stopping it at Georgia. If there's any glimmer of hope, you ain't getting past it. You're not ready. I think your coaching staff showed you what they can do. Now they got to go get dudes, Joe. That's what it comes down to. They got some bodies up front, though. CJ West, I think, is a guy. They got some bodies up front. But, man, they're not ready for this. And I'm just going to tell you this. If Notre Dame goes out there and out-physicals them in the last 3 games that I got to see of Indiana, real true games, I'm not talking about Purdue, is you getting out-physicaled, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind because you know what it should be? It should be Bama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina in that situation in the snow in South Bend.
All right, let's not be here. Let's not use this as an opportunity to grandstand. No. We had plenty of time to yell about this.
Hold on, can I just say one thing? Can you give me yes, no here? I swear I'll end it here.
I don't like it when you ask me these questions.
If Indiana against Michigan, Ohio State, and now Notre Dame get out-physicaled the way that they have been the last 3 games that we've really actually seen them against quality competition, if they get out-physicaled again, we're gonna be talking about this all off season, and you know that. Like, hey, man, we had Arizona State, we had Boise State, we had Indiana, we had SMU. 4 of the 12 teams, a third of the teams got absolutely dominated.
I don't think that there is, again, as I said,
a quarter of it.
I still don't think that there is a necessary right answer at times with who belonged in the playoff or not. An example of this is the FCS football playoffs. You can roll your eyes at this if you want. One of the best teams in their conference showed up to play against North Dakota State and got their asses kicked in Mercer. Incarnate Word was the best team in their conference, got their asses kicked by South Dakota State. So, yes, of course, the teams that have established consistent success are going to out-physical and out-dominate their opponents that they recruited better than them for a decade plus. So, I don't. That's not going to change my perspective. Indiana, good season. They earned the right to be there. They had 1 loss.
Whatever. I'm not getting into it. All right, let's wrap it up here. So, Joe, there was some big news in the transfer portal the last couple of days. None real bigger from a Nationals perspective because of the quarterback situation and Hugh Freeze. But Jackson Arnold taking his talents instead of Mississippi State to the Auburn Tigers. A lot of Auburn fans are not excited about this. I guess, what are your thoughts on Jackson Arnold going to Auburn?
Well, I think that for anyone who's not excited about this, I mean, it's not like a high-risk move. He doesn't have to start this year. We talked about that possibility, and you were against it.
No, he's got to start this year because there are other quarterbacks left. I mean, you're going to put in Deuce Knight?
Well, that was what I was going to say, is that if theoretically you're not in love with Jackson Arnold and the way that he plays in camp, you can turn to Deuce Knight. I think that there are much better receiving options an improving offensive line and a better defensive line. There's a better core at Auburn than there was at Oklahoma. There's a better infrastructure and a better offensive system for Jackson Arnold to play this year. Jackson Arnold, the one thing that's going to hurt him potentially, though, that might not work out, the last quarterbacks that you had were turnover prone.
Oh, and this is not this kid.
Jackson Arnold has made some brutal decisions, and it all started with the way that he played against what was that, the Fiesta Bowl that he played? Well, when they played against Arizona, he had a bunch of
he threw 3 picks against Arizona in that bowl game in his first ever start. But again, his OC's not there. Levy's gone.
Okay.
They're happy, right? They're promoting from within.
He still did that this year. He didn't handle pressure very well this year. He got benched midway through and then stepped back in. There's a world where Jackson Arnold plays really well because he's a good athlete. He can move. He's got a little bit of Chad Kelly in him, maybe with the way that he plays the quarterback position that could work within the system. But we're banking on him improving his decision-making. That's like the biggest part about this. I don't think it's super high risk as many people think it is, unless the expectation is that Auburn is supposed to be competing for a national championship.
Well, hold on. I saw him go up against Alabama and basically run the ball 25 times and win a football game.
Yeah, but he ain't going to be able to do that every single week at Auburn, man. He's got to be a better passer.
No, you're right. Their top 5 receivers were out, and he couldn't throw the football. That's all he could do. So what happens when Cam Coleman is on a double move and he's got time to throw the football, which he did not have at Oklahoma? I don't think – here's 2 things. Number one, I don't think that I know exactly what Jackson Arnold is at the moment. I don't.
It's fair.
Okay. So what? He threw 3 picks in a bowl game. He was a true freshman, whatever. You're right. First start. Okay. But I look at him this year. They fired their offensive coordinator midway through the season. They said he was horrible. They got better as an offense when their OC was gone. We criticized them as the worst offensive line in the SEC, and we're blaming him. Now,
no, not blaming him.
No. We were blaming him. Let's go back to when we were blaming him that he wasn't good and he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. We called for him to be benched, remember, after the Tennessee game, and we saw the other kid that came in. No. Let's not go back there. People were asking for him to be benched. So there comes a part where he's the one that comes in and has to run the ball 25 times against Alabama and win. Look, the last game that this kid played, nobody watched him more than this guy right here. I promise you. No one. Because covering LSU, the last game they played, whatever. This kid can play, Joe. I'm telling you now, he's got some moxie to him. What happens in a non-turnover worthy situation? I don't like the move necessarily for him, but there comes a part where everybody's criticizing this kid for what? You don't know who he is. Was Oklahoma the worst offensive line in the SEC? Yes or no?
It was, but
did he have top 5 targets? Andrew,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, he did. It's fine to
fired in the middle way through the season.
I don't disagree with what you're saying here. That he has the traits to be a good player to work in the. I literally just said this. I literally just said that there is a capability for him to succeed, but at the same time, understandably, with difficulties in front of him, he still made plenty of avoidable mistakes. Like he still had a bunch of issues with his performance. So there's still
none worse than Peyton Thorne.
Auburn is also not Auburn's not like a complete team at the current moment. You know, they're not at that level where they're really hitting their stride with their roster. So it's not like he's stepping into a complete team that sets him up to go 9-3. He's going to have just the same level of issues that he did last year.
I'm going to disagree with that. I disagree with it because Auburn had a top 30 offense. Top 30. That's with
Jarquez Hunter's gone. He's going to go to the
okay,
NFL.
Fine. They'll get it back. Let's not act like Hugh's not going to get it back. They'll get it back. I'm not worried about them there. What I'm saying is, you look at the Arkansas game. That should be a win. Like there are a lot of games that Peyton Thorne lost them. Like, I mean, Joe, they were a top 30 offense with that dude.
All I'm saying, and you agreed with me here, Jackson Arnold, turnover prone. He's turnover prone. Your last guys that you had were turnover prone. That has been what has held back Jackson Arnold. That is what has held him back as a player, is that it's the decision-making and it's the turnovers. So we're banking on a lot there for him to step into new. That's my whole deal here. You're right. If he plays to his potential, this is a top 5, 10 quarterback in the country. But I've only seen the negative side of his play. Well, and this offense requires him to make good decisions. That's all I'm saying.
I think that he does make good decisions. Again, I'm not going to criticize a first-time starter on some of the things that he had issues with. Right. Why does he not get the breaks? Why does everybody else get to do what they do and then they get the breaks besides him? And then I throw on top of it, Auburn, newsflash to everybody in the country. He just went through arguably one of the toughest situations in the country and made chicken salad out of chicken shit. He did. Joe, he by himself made them bowl eligible. By himself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, yes, that's true. The way that he played
only running the football.
And that was commendable, but that's not replicable. Nothing he did then. It wasn't.
Sure.
It wasn't like, wait. Here's a really good example. When Jane Daniels was at Arizona State, they had that upset over Oregon, and you saw wow.
You for making my point.
Well, no. The way that stop. The way that Jaden Daniels played as a passer and as a runner and just as a playmaker, we all were reminded, I'm like, wow, this kid's really gifted if he was in a better situation. Jackson Arnold just ran the whole game. That is not something that's going to get recreated at Auburn this upcoming year.
You're missing the bigger point. What happens when he doesn't have to do that?
I don't know if he can succeed not doing that, though. That's the best game that he played his whole career. There's more questions than answers here. That's what I'm trying to display.
Oklahoma was the worst offense in the SEC.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
All right. Other portal news you want to get to here?
I just wanted to hit on Dylan Thieneman, who committed to the University of Oregon. He is
over 100 tackles in 2 years as a safety, so he can really play here.
I broke his film down as a true freshman early on in his career, and I was working for a scouting agency, and I put his film out for recommendation for agents, and I was blown away really early on and thought, like, this is an NFL kid. Like 4 games into his career, he was a former 3-star. He is a big, strong kid. He's not afraid to tackle. His instincts and his angles are tremendous. He is somebody that you could put in the box, and they were using him at Purdue as a free safety. He was covering center field the whole top of the field. I think that you throw him into this Oregon defense, Blake, where he doesn't have to play that, and he could play a little bit more as a linebacker and as a strong safety and be a really good tackler, kind of like the way that Caleb Downs plays at Ohio State. I think he's going to play amazing at Oregon. This all goes back to what we have talked about with Dan Lanning of being able to ID talent and be able to attract the top talent. They have had good safeties in his time there. This is a different level of a safety. This is potentially a premier guy who could go on to be a top 5 safety selected in the 2026 draft.
I mean, I'll just say I think he's the best player in the portal almost. I think that I can make that argument. He's definitely the best defender, okay, right now. There can be others, okay? A lot of kids can hit the portal. We don't know who we don't know yet. And it's not over with yet. There does come a point, though, Joe. This kid's a stud, man. Everybody wanted him. I talked to one. I'll say this. I have a really good friend. Joe knows who it is, but I have a really good friend on an SEC staff. They were after him. They knew the market. They matched the market, and it didn't matter. Oregon said, no, sir. We love defense. We love secondary. We're going to get it. And they did. I talked to somebody else in the SEC. Joe knows what I'm talking about. He was the number 1 player on their portal board. And the money that this kid turned down to go to Oregon is kind of insane. So that is what we're hearing from real life staff members in the SEC who wanted this kid. Kid doesn't leave the Big Ten footprint. You get to go play for Oregon, potentially the national title, the biggest contender here in the Oregon Ducks. This kid can play, though. Thing about me with him is he's fundamentally sound in tackling and everything that he does. That's what I think Dan Lanning. Wait, this kid is this good of an athlete, got this good of instincts, and he can tackle. The things that they can do with him versatility-wise is big. And then safeties don't catch that many interceptions. Sorry, they don't. And he's all over the place. Teams avoided him. He was the only star at Purdue really this year. Yeah. Absolute stud, man. Dude, 100 tackles back-to-back years. Purdue was bad.
He didn't redshirt. He just went in there and played. And he did this.
There's a game in there because there's a game in there, like a drive, where he's got no sleeves. He's got no wristbands. He's got no gloves. He's got his fingers taped. And I'm like, listen, if a guy goes out there with sleeves and his fingers taped, you're in if he goes full Brian Dawkins on you, you're in massive trouble. You're in absolute massive trouble.
He's a tough ass kid.
He's a tough son of a bitch. Just call it what it is. Oh, all right. Any super chats in here? Yeah, we got one. Fish says SEC people complain about Sheed, then play Mercer
schedule,
and then play Mercer in week 13.
I don't think that's a good counter argument. I really don't think that's a good counter argument.
Let's just be real.
And I've had a lot of counter arguments against you. The Mercer week 13 thing is not a good counter argument.
It's not a good counter argument. Listen, again, I'm going to keep throwing this out there. Let's look at the teams that didn't make the playoff, just for an example. And let's look at their last month. Ole Miss faced four of the last 6 opponents that they faced were ranked opponents. Okay. They went 4-2. South Carolina, 6 of the last 8 that they had were ranked. By the way, how many of them are in the playoff or right outside the playoff? Mm-hmm. Then you have Alabama. They have the best win in the country right now. Them and Ole Miss have the best win in the country right now, and I think we all agree with that. So
yeah, it doesn't affect as. I don't think that is a strong counter argument because it doesn't take in the whole grand picture. It's like just trying to point out one bad game that these SEC teams typically schedule in the middle of November to face an FCS team. It's just strategic scheduling to give yourself a breather.
Ask James Franklin if he wants to go through South Carolina's schedule, and ask Shane Beamer if he wants to go through Penn State's. He'd much rather face the 2 teams that he lost to than the other way around. I promise you that. All right. Anything else here before we get out of here?
No. Great show.
All right. We'll break down playoff games yet again tomorrow. Until then, we'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good night. Peace.